everyone.
Hello, hello, hello.
I'm super excited to be here. I am not a Syracuse alum, but it's okay. I'm now in my heart. I am. Super privileged to be sitting here with the absolute cultural savant and guru.
Thank you, thank you.
And not only has he written the playbook pretty much for all culture marketing across lifestyle, music, sport, everything, but he is also a prof at Syracuse, so that is awesome here. Yes. So we'll just turn it over to you, Javier. Would love to hear your brand story, a little bit your journey. It says your title, right? Brand Growth Advisor, Cultural Curator. A rumor has it you made up your title. We love that. Works for the NFL, and love to hear your journey there and your winding bit of how you ended up in culture marketing and what it means to you.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Making up my title. I think that I earned making up my title from working in corporate for like 25 years. So I actually did a lot of corporate gigs. So my first claim to fame was in the marketing world. I worked at Paramount, which was Viacom at the time, and I did integrated marketing and business development. So I learned from being in the business of entertainment, what it takes to be an entertainment marketer. But I realized that just integrated marketing wasn't enough. And prior to that, the way I got the gig is I went to business school, did all the things that you needed to do from an academic perspective, but I also started a hip hop magazine in the late 90s, and I sold it as a .com during the internet kind of boom, and made some money, and that gave Paramount or Viacom the opportunity or the appeal to actually think about me in a different way, right? And that got me into the doors there. Leaving there, Viacom, I spent like around 7 years, and I worked on Ultimate Fighting. I worked on creating Diego for Dora from a BD perspective. I worked on MTV Music Awards, MTV Video Games Awards. I've worked on every award show you can think of. I got recruited to go to Microsoft. And it was a long, long time ago, and Apple was about to launch their phone, and Microsoft thought they could compete. And we spent a ton of money doing that. I moved to Seattle, but I was one of the first entertainment marketers that they hired in that space. And that gave me a different perspective of the world, right? It gave me more of a tech perspective and engineering perspective of how to solve entertainment solutions for the consumers. And that gave me another perspective, and I was a product marketer at that point. And then I moved out of there and got recruited to work at PepsiCo. And at PepsiCo, I went over to do consumer engagement, which I kind of didn't know what that meant. But
Learn on the job.
Exactly. But what it gave me the opportunity to do is go after a specific audience, which is the multicultural audience. It also helped me. I ran the music and entertainment division, so I did all the halftime shows. And then I started piecing together that there's something called culture that I'm good at, because that's what I was being hired for. And that's kind of where I started designing this idea of being a cultural curator.
Obsessed, and seems like you're the most connected person. So let's just hear it, like coolest celebrity you've met or no, because clearly you've met them all.
I've met a lot of them, but I don't know if I've met them personally. Like people think it sounds sexy to be around like all the names that I will drop, but I probably only dealt with their managers and probably took a picture with the celebrity. But it's really dealing with their management. You were actually in the agent side, so you understand what
that. Yeah, I've been the manager side, yeah. Bodyguarding them.
Exactly right? Like, so as a brand person, I was always striking deals to help amplify what they needed. But I've worked with folks like, Jay-Z, Beyonce, Bruno Mars, Katy Perry, Eminem, recently, we did The Weeknd for the NFL, Anita, Daddy Yankee, those type of folks. But again, I have not been exposed to them directly. Yeah. It's usually through their management in some capacity. But people think it's sexy.
Yeah, but that's actually really, it's awesome. as a cultural marketer, we're going to go into what that versus multicultural marketing, which a little controversial statement here, but I hear you don't believe in the term, right, multicultural marketing. Love to dive into what does cultural marketing mean to you? Who are you trying to reach versus multicultural marketing? I think, obviously you've lived it, you've walked that walk of culture, so what does that mean to you?
When I said that a few years ago, I was at Pepsi, and what was starting to happen was, they were like, hey, you need to figure out how to go after these audiences, and every time they put the multicultural stamp on that, it actually triggered a decrease in funding from a brand perspective, and I didn't want to be in that space. So what I said to them is let's do a bottoms-up approach on how we build a brand with this consumer from a budget perspective, and let's focus on cultures that we cared about. And I think people really understood that. And I took on not the Hispanic culture or the African American culture. I said, give me country, and I'll tell you how I can build a business around country. And I was able to connect country and the sensibilities of what country culture looks like with Mountain Dew, and was able to build an engagement strategy around that. And I think people understood that and got out of those systematic, biases that come with people of color. And using that would help me really redefine how we think about brand building in the perspective of culture. And I feel like now people talk about culture all the time because social has changed the paradigm of how to think about brand building through micro or subcultures that are happening within the social ecosystem, and we have to build with communities at that level. I was doing that, pre-social, but it was in the same sentiment that's happening in social now.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You wrote that playbook, right? And it's great, and I think it's important. I think that leads us. I want to talk about authenticity, right? As you said, if you're going to be reaching different consumers, we have really savvy marketers and consumers out there now more than ever. They see through things. Lots of transparency needed. So how do you make a playbook or your ingredients for authenticity? And would love to also hear, you can talk about even maybe a campaign that you've done as an example, but also would love to hear a cringe-worthy campaign you've seen. It does not have to be that you worked on, but just one that you're like, ooh, that was not authentic while trying to reach this new target.
I'll talk about stuff I've done because I failed a ton. So I'll talk about my failures. But it's interesting because when I got the gig at the NFL, the reason I got the gig was I was working at Rock Nation prior to that as an interim CMO to Title for Jay and Des, and they kind of recommended me to the NFL. And honestly, the way I got the gig was like, hey, we're doing Miami halftime show. How do we get people to get excited about that? So a lot of the work that I did was to be authentic, was to do research. I straight up did a ton of research and provided perspective on how to think about the halftime show differently. So it was really about informing the folks within the NFL on the key ingredients that they need to really go after that specific audience that they needed to get, which was a Hispanic one. But Jay and Des already knew what they wanted to do, right? Jay and Des are the people that are actually programming the halftime show. So there was a debate on J-Lo or should it be Shakira, then they combined them too. But if you looked at all the insights that was going in, it's like nobody really cared about those folks. People that don't really know care about it because it's such a big name, but people that really knew about the subculture that was happening, it was Bad Bunny and J Balvin at the time. So I was informing that, but through social listening, right? And that's where people were at, and that created the moment and the gratitude of what the platform was able to do for those two artists. Now think about how big they were. And it's funny because I was teaching at the time at Seton Hall, and I was showing these young people about them, And some people kind of knew, but some people now, and now if you show anybody who these folks are, everybody knows who these guys are. But it's the social conversations that were happening that were building that. So, when did I get it wrong? So I got it wrong when I started doing this type of process with a gentleman called Tyler the Creator. Everybody knows who he is, right? I grabbed him before he was part of something called Odd Future. Do you guys know what Odd Future was?
Yep.
Yes, young people probably know what Odd Future was. So yeah, Odd Future was popping, you know, and Frank Ocean came out of there. There's a bunch of people that were coming out of that camp. And we saw the energy that was happening in LA. And one of the tasks that was given to me is how do you make Mountain Dew, and I have a lot of young people around me to inform me, how do you make Mountain Dew pop with that energy that Mountain Dew is from a brand perspective? And we're like, okay, so like, Odd Future is the play, but this dude is about to go on his own, and let's make it happen. So we started talking to his team. You know, we got into the same mental space that he's in creatively, right? Which is a very hard place to get a brand to, right? Tyler the Creator is very out there. My challenge is I gave him too much control over the creative. And I produced it, I signed off on it, it was out in the world. Probably a week later, everybody starts running into my office, and on every TV station, it said the most racist ad ever done by a corporation, by a Syracuse professor who actually called me out, by the way, which is full circle. And our stock price dropped, that we lost around $20 million in that day. And it was a cultural play that I tried to do, which was too early, right? Imagine I did that now, I'll be like the superstar. But, you know, it's a sensibility that you need to kind of play off, and you have to have the right business terms to do that. So, yeah. And I almost lost my job.
Well, I think that also, it kind of leads us to another question, which is where do you get your inspiration from when it comes to deciding how you're going to reach these different segment groups and making these culture decisions, and maybe some advice for people out here, marketers or aspiring marketeers, on where you look for that research and inspo that you can really be off, you know, to make those smart decisions?
I think that it's a combination of things. Honestly, like, the blessing to me is actually teaching at a place like Syracuse, because I get around young people that are really, you know, bright-eyed and whatever that saying is.
Bushy-tailed?
They're like that. So they give you that energy and they give you so much insight. Like, I think I'm the coolest guy ever sometimes in my head, and I come in, I'm like telling my stories. I was just telling you, I was talking about Jay-Z and all this. They kind of don't care. You know, I tell them about that I've worked with I Show Speed, or somebody I'm dealing with, Vinny Jr. They're like, oh my God, like, do you guys know who I Show Speed is? Yeah, I guess now we put them on NFL. But yeah, but these guys are like the creators of now. These are the celebrities of now. So being around them and validating that is important. Second piece is, you know, I work with a lot of media companies that are in the digital side that give me perspective, and then I have insight people that actually inform me. So a combination of all that helps me be in tune with how to think about culture and how to connect it to brand. The challenge is that culture is a sport of participation. So if you're just going to sit back and just let people inform, you'll always be behind. So, you know, I have to stay in the pulse of what's going on to continue to be relevant. One of my biggest challenge now is NFL is looking to globalize its business. So they're like, how do you open up Madrid? How do you open up Brazil? I don't know those markets, right? So it's like me going out there, which is great because my wife likes to go out and travel with me, but it's also like I have to figure out who the right culture makers are within those communities to actually inform how to think about it and put the process that I've created into brand building, right?
Yeah. Well, that's fun. I mean, walking the walk. So I think for all of us, you know, I think that takeaway is let's go to the museums, let's go to the concerts, let's actually walk the streets. I do think that is any marketer with that hat on is how can you be relevant is to actually deeply listen to the world around you. So I love that suggestion. And also, it should be fun. Let's do a pulse check on ourselves here. We work in a really fun world. So let's be fun with it, especially, I'm in the live events space. It's experiential, it's fun, it should be engaging. So I think getting out there, it's a great suggestion. You mentioned global. I think we can sort of segue into, let's talk about global. How does an American pastime named football penetrate a market where they already have a football, right? So I think it's really interesting. Love everything international. Would love to hear about some of that was planned, how you're entering those different cultural markets and expansion, and maybe even some little teasers, what's happening for next year.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. Like, it's a machine. So I'm one spoke of a huge organization, right? So I only integrate and provide perspective on how they're thinking about stuff. So what I would say is my mandate in the beginning was how do you think about growth for that business from a fan development perspective? And we did a ton of research. There's a huge insights team that informs us, and we realized, we have kind of 75% of the U.S. market. Like we're killing it, right? So how do you go beyond that? So we started looking at different opportunities. The first one was Latino, because they love other sports, and that's a myth, right? And we actually just milled that myth and fed into it, and now we're killing it there. We said women, right? We need to get more women to become more avid, and we got a godsend Taylor Swift to us, and now we're killing it there. And then we need young people, and one of the things that we've been planning is how to become more inclusive. And if you notice, all the advertising we're doing is around flag football. Why? Inclusivity, young, and then guess what's coming? The Olympics. We're finally in the Olympics in 2028. What does that mean? Global expansion, right? Because we need people to be playing. So how do you inspire people to be playing? They have to see it, put it on TV. They have to feel it. We got to take games out there. They have to want to be a part of it, so they buy our swag, right? And then they need to feel that we are relevant to their audience, and that's where I come in, right? I don't deal with the TV deals, but people are doing a lot of smart things and thinking through how do you build audience, and they're finding the right partners to do that. And that was happening way before I even thought about NFL. I'm not a sports guy, but so they were in Mexico 25 years ago. They were in Brazil maybe 15 years ago, already building that business and building an audience. Then there's a temperature check of when you can actually bring an event there. Do they have the country support? Do they have the community support to do that? Do they have the facilities to actually have that happen? When they check those thresholds, they're in. And that was one of my first experiences, was actually Brazil leading some of those efforts. And then now, how do you create the cultural cachet that doesn't feel like we're just not part of their community? And I wish I showed you some of the stuff that we did, but we created a spot that really kind of talked about the cultural celebrations that they use in sport, and we just applied them to football. And we found communities that actually play football to do that. So we didn't really like manufacture it. We actually found people that actually really love the sport, and then it happened to be, through our connection, and we have an amazing entertainment team at the NFL. We found out that The Weeknd is creating a song that was launching probably a month after we got there, called Sao Paulo, about Brazil. And he was actually going to perform on YouTube the day after. And we're like, holy shit, this is perfect. So he gave us the opportunity to put that song exclusively on the spot that we did, that gave up the momentum and the conversation piece with the community to say, we're bringing a global sport here, not an American sport. And that actually allowed us to have that conversation. And then, of course, we put Anita at halftime. So that was good for America. I'm not sure if it was the thing that the subculture of Brazil wanted, but we gave them access to the sport, and that allowed us. And I guess the other thing that we noticed in a lot of this conversation that was happening socially is they felt very proud of their success in the Olympics 3 weeks before that. And we decided to put all women Olympians to open up the game.
Oh, so culturally relevant. See, okay, I see the authenticity tie-ins there.
Yeah, and then that killed it. Like that really kind of allowed people to say, it's not the Americans coming in and dropping the sport. It's actually they're celebrating our culture by making them open it up, and that really was a real connection point there.
Yeah, I love it. I think it is always really about how can you find those nuggets of true connection with new consumers instead of force-fitting into the wrong messaging. You mentioned you have a great entertainment team. I think we can't talk about the NFL without talking about Super Bowl, halftime show. I think we're all here waiting for tickets, so we're really excited.
I don't know even after the tickets, so I'm not even going to talk about that. But.
So, of course, coming from the experiential live event space, I love the heartbeat of bringing brands to life in a live way. I think it's really exciting. I think this is also relevant. Brands influencing culture. Like we think about how many of us think of how like our football Sundays and our Super Bowl days, and we even associate it with chicken wings, and we have like the jerseys everywhere, like totally permeating pop culture, as well as even like our little football dances for the touchdowns. So love your point of view on how you think the NFL brand has infiltrated this pop culture using these vehicles, and also how does one select a halftime performer? Super cool. Would love to be there on the stage with them one day.
So I would say it's funny because it all changed when Rock Nation and Jay-Z took over. So honestly, it's done by him and that team. Like we just find out, it's super secret, it's at the Roger level and a couple of people at that level, and they keep it, very tight to the chest. So it's done through there, and he has a cultural perspective that we align to, and the world aligns to because it actually does well. That's one. So that's kind of how it's done now. I think there is an input on the city's culture, and then what else is happening from a pop culture perspective that influences that. Hence, we have the gentleman that we have today, which I can't think of his name right now. So that's me. I can think of his song, but it's not me. Who's doing it again?
Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick. But prior to that, it was more of a collective process with the sponsor. And when I was at Pepsi, we didn't make that decision, but we influenced that decision. So we were pushing the agenda of kind of like the pop, we were the pop drink and whatever. So we advocated for Bruno Mars. We advocated for Coldplay. So we were part of that process, but they made the ultimate decision. I think this particular way is actually is a lot more successful than I think anybody could think. But I think the real secret to the sauce of halftime is the storytelling prior to that. They've really been able to create demand for wanting to know about it and creating demand for the 18 minutes that happened during that time. I don't know if I answered your question though.
Definitely on sort of how it's selected. Would love to hear then, how you feel, brands and the NFL specifically through that lens, or we could talk about other brands too, have permeated pop culture. And are there any surprising places that you've seen it pop up? Is there some way that you've seen, it's of course, it's like how can a brand really integrate into society? And I feel like the NFL certainly has done it where we don't even realize it when we're these associations we have.
The challenge with the benefit with the NFL is it's every Sunday. So it's and it already has rituals associated to it. So it's hard. They have an easier time than brands. Brands have to invest in the time, create reasons to believe. I think the secret sauce of now, I think there's a framework that I call kind of onboarding. I think you have to first inspire a community to care, and you can create different ways of doing that. Then you have to create a community, is the second piece of it, and create communities and support those communities in whatever way possible. Then from there, you can actually create some type of advocacy, because you need to have those people advocate for you. I think that simple system is the way you actually build community. You know, one of the things that we have to do, I'm going to just talk about the NFL real quick, because it's the top of mind. You know, we have to go after young people. And we were like, we don't have like real marketing dollars to do that. So we told our partners to do that, and we pushed them to do that. This year, think about it, we're going to have the Simpsons, actually, a game with the Simpsons playing, right? So we did it last year where we had Toy Story, it was the game. So they actually put chips on the players, and then Toy Story reenacted the whole game.
Oh, so cool.
We're going to do that now with Disney Plus and the Simpsons. So the idea, the premise of it is going to be, you know, Homer is going to be fall asleep, and then he's going to be reimagining the name in his dream with all the characters within that, and you'll be seeing that on TV on Disney Plus. You know, that's an innovative way, because we wanted to tap into youth culture or a certain type of young culture, and that's our way in through that. And I think doing things like that is going to be important for any brand to do that. As an example of someone that's doing it well, I mean, I'm also, Walmart is my client, and I think one of the really interesting things that they're doing is tapping into merch collabs in certain areas that they know that there's, you know, an appetite for Walmart consumer to really want to do something with them, and creating a kind of social media demand for those products. And you'll see a lot of that start to happen now, because we know that that is where the consumer is when it's creating advocacy for specific products.
I love everything really tying back into this. You know, the research is key. I think we'll do one last little quick question for you, and then we might have time to open it up. I'm not sure, we're running out of time here, but I think, you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, like what is successful, what it looks like is successful, you know, really hitting that authenticity mark. What do you feel some of the biggest challenges are now that you face or that we all face, and sort of how do we break through that clutter? Any suggestions you might have for everyone here moving forward with?
I don't know if I have any suggestions other than I could tell you what the challenges are. Share of mind for young people, like they're all over the place, it's so hard. You know, we got to get out of the system of 30-second spots to create brand that doesn't work anymore fully. And then I would say AI. AI is going to be so intelligent that it's going to be understanding how to behave prior to the demand of the audience that you want. How do you use that really to your benefit? Even in some of the coursework I have, I use that as an extension of the students, because I need them to learn how to use those tools, because that is what's being used at work in some capacity. I just don't know how it unfolds.
Yeah.
And as we're thinking about culture, you know, culture is a sentiment that is produced by community. What happens when it's manufactured by AI? Like, you know, then, you know, what's real, what's not. So that's a little bit like, you know, conundrum in my head, and how do you think about the work that I do?
Yeah.
All I can say is that I'm very blessed to be with big brands that want to hear my perspective, and I give them that advice, and, you know, and they take it, you know? Yeah,
no, I appreciate that. I think, yeah, as we said, that walking that authentic walk. Final question before we will open it up is there any dream collaboration or wild thing that you would be like, this would be so fun to do, but you just...
You know, I think there's going to be a revolution in film. So I think the idea of like marketing film or understanding the filmmaking process through AI is going to be really interesting, and I want to be a part of that in some capacity.
Cool.
I'm starting to see, you know, some challenges with some studios and them rethinking how the development process is starting to work so that it's more cost efficient and it's not gatekept by like 3 people. Like that seems very interesting to me. And then the distribution of that and the remaking of like the exhibition side of that business. With Netflix coming in, I've talked to AMC and how they're thinking about that model. Think about some of the business profit sharing that happens with the studio and the actual company. Now you can go directly to creators and do a 50-50 split. There's just a lot of recreation of business models within that space that could be very interesting, and it's going to rethink how we think about entertainment.
So cool. Well, thank you so much. Are there any burning questions out there before we go to lunch?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Matt. I'm a 2016 Newhouse grad. I'm curious, when you think about some of the leaders you have worked for and collaborated with, like, are there any traits that have separated the great leaders from the ordinary ones, and how have you tried to apply it to your own style as a leader?
Great question, by the way. So I'm gonna shout out a few people that are my mentors, and I find them amazingly. Tim Ellis, NFL CMO. He's a G. The second one is another mentor of mine is Frank Cooper, global CMO of Visa. I worked for him for many years. And then this other gentleman called Dario Spina, who's at Paramount now, another CMO. And I would also say Marissa Solis, who I work very closely at the NFL. They are leaders that are empathetic and understand how to lead from behind, and also have the ability to take risks. And then they actually have a really creative sensibility with a strategic perspective. But they lean into their creativity. I think sometimes people fall back into a false security with data. And they don't realize that sometimes creativity is really what breaks through. So I think those guys that I just mentioned have that sensibility. But they are, they care about their team. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's important. Like, if you really feel that, then I feel liberated to take risk and be as creative as possible and fail at times, but it's a calculated fail.
Thank you.
Yes.
So it sounds like you've worked across different clients and different verticals, and then it struck me when you mentioned that you're not into sports. And working with the NFL, how do you align your personal interests with that of your clients? Is it important? And what, like, especially when working with culture as well?
I go to places where there's cultural cachet, and if there's any, like if sports just fell into my lap through Rock Nation, but it's the NFL. Like, there's no more cultural cachet that you can get from there. So I was just like, let me figure out if I can actually have an impact in that space. And that's kind of how I looked at my perspective. But I'm also, so I try to be very strategic about the places and the people that I actually associate myself to. So I look for brands that are going to give me continued cachet and access. So Syracuse is a dope school, so I'm going to align myself with Syracuse. NFL gives me kind of that cachet that makes people want to hear from me. Walmart, the biggest retailer, they got a competition with Amazon. It's a challenge for me. I think I want to take that challenge.
Well, so I think we're wrapped up now.
Cool.
Wrapping up.
Enjoy lunch. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,